Buenos días. Good morning, everyone. We're going to have this session in English today. My name is Enrique Aznar. I'm the academic director of the IE-Elecnor Observatory on Sustainable Corporate Compliance Cultures. We welcome you to this beautiful tower. It is the first event that we have in the tower as an observatory. I'm very pleased. Thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you to these great panelists. And I'm going to introduce the observatory. The observatory is an initiative that was born in 2019, where when the IE Foundation and the Elecnor Foundation decided to join forces to do something to foster compliance culture and sustainability culture, particularly with a focus in medium-sized or small companies. The law firm of Eversheds, Sutherland, is supporting the observatory from a technical perspective. And then we have a number of objectives as the observatory, right? We try to capture and develop knowledge to help people understand the challenges that are faced by, as I said, medium-sized companies in their implementation of a culture of compliance. I've been a compliance officer for more than 20 years. From a moment where people did not speak about compliance beyond the financial industry. And I have seen an evolution on the role of compliance officers and compliance in general in corporations. And I can say that still in 2022, I think there is a big misunderstanding about what compliance is, right? Many companies focus on creating models, controls, policies, which of course are really necessary. But there is something that I think is still missing. Some companies start to see it, which is the culture, right? And I've been focusing in the last period of my career in creating cultures, not only of compliance. I would like to talk about ethical cultures, right? And the observatory gives us the opportunity to communicate this, to speak to people who don't have access to information about compliance or compliance culture. And then this is what we try to do at the observatory. So first, we want to capture knowledge and help people. We want to facilitate the implementation of a culture not only of compliance, of sustainability as well. Now we see a very important trend, right? And actually legislation is helping us a lot because now we have directives that deal with corporate reporting on non-financial information. And actually, if it does not apply to all companies, it applies to big companies that, in a way, cause a domino effect, expecting smaller companies who are not obliged to implement controls, etc., to actually do it, because they benefit from this. Then we also want to disseminate this knowledge, right? And I will speak in a moment about the initiatives that we have taken at the observatory. We want to facilitate the understanding and create a common framework in terms of compliance. We are here as a resource. Right? And I was talking this morning with Jorge Ballester, who's responsible of communications at Elecnor. And we were saying, well, why should not aim at being the observatory of reference in a couple of years? Right? And I think we have the opportunity to do so. We belong in this great organization. We have the resources. We just need a little bit of visibility and support from members. I'm happy that today some former students are here supporting us, and we are going to be discussing initiatives. Right? Perhaps we don't think about them, but you are welcome to make proposals to the observatory. Right? So far, we have focused on a number of areas. We are now finalizing our second research on corporate cultures. We started with a research conducted by some professors of IE Law School on corporate culture in Spain. We are now finalizing the study in Latin America. We promote and expect our professors, our faculty, our students to write articles. We publish them in our website and other media. In 2022, we have started to conduct podcasts where we interview people who are relevant to the business world, academia, judiciary, law. So we have interviewed a number of people in these areas to talk about how ethical are corporations and what is still missing and how can we take this thing forward. I think that, well, I will continue with other things. We have also published some training materials which are a bit more technical stuff, and as I said, to help those who don't have access to this information. So together with the law firm associated or supporting us, we are producing training materials, pills about compliance. And then this is an event that we are going to continue to have in the future, right, where we can participate, right, and see us face to face, right. Thanks God, the pandemic seems to be almost over from this perspective. And shortly, we are going to launch a newsletter. We will consolidate the initiatives that we have carried out in the past, right. Today, in the spirit of not focusing only on the technical aspects of compliance, because the observatory aims at reflecting and observing and seeing what are the trends in the world and in the industry. We have invited 3 spectacular panelists, experts on artificial intelligence, and we're going to be discussing how companies, how businesses can use artificial intelligence in a way that not only helps them become more productive, but helps them make a positive impact in society. We all know, and we will discuss in more detail, that the use of artificial intelligence poses tremendous advantages, but also poses some very important challenges from a legal and an ethical perspective. So, what is artificial intelligence? Well, I'm not the expert, I will let the speakers, but basically, as an introduction, artificial intelligence is a very rapidly advancing field of technology that has the potential to transform many different industries, including businesses, right? When you came in this morning, you went through the entrance and there was face recognition. Right? Okay, this is an application of artificial intelligence, even if we don't realize that it is. Right? So in the business world, artificial intelligence is being used to automate many tasks and processes, from data analysis, and we will speak a lot about this, to customer service and supply chain, etc. In reality, to prepare this session, I've taken advantage of a fascinating phenomenon that happened last week. A California company, OpenAI, launched an application called ChatGPT, right? This may mean nothing to you, but this has been the first application that has reached 1 million users in 6 days, right? It is open because they are testing it, so they are inviting users. Okay. So I had spent a number of weeks reading materials, preparing for this session. But then I decided to use it. And I asked this artificial intelligence tool, what is the best format for a panel on artificial intelligence where we will discuss opportunities and ethical challenges? And in real time, it gave me a response. I said, well, that's interesting. And then I said, oh, yeah, what is the most interesting question that I can ask the panelists? And it gave me an answer. And what is the second best question I can ask the panelists? And it gave me another answer, right? I'm not going to disclose what part of the session today is mine or the artificial intelligence, but I can tell you, I really invite you to use it. Okay, so we have here today, as I said, 3 wonderful panelists. Here we have Richard Benjamin. He's a chief artificial intelligence and data strategist at Telefonica and co-founder and vice president of the Spanish Observatory. Manuela Battaglini, is a digital ethics, transparency, and social impact expert and CEO and researcher of Transparent Internet. And Javier Camacho is expert in business and AI ethics consultant. He's a professor and a partner director of Sostenibilidad Ética. Gestión de la ética en las organizaciones, etc. Now they are going to actually explain a little bit more about this, share a little bit more about themselves, because their CV is too long for me to read it. So I'm going to sit here with you, and I will start with you, Richard. Thank you for coming first.
It's a pleasure.
Can you share a little bit about yourself, your background, what is it that you're doing?
Sure. So thank you all very much for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm from the Netherlands, but living for many years already in Spain. So I work currently at, one of the things I do is working at Telefonica, responsible for the future of AI and data. And currently very much busy with implementing the ethical use of artificial intelligence across the company. Yeah? So it's not only statements of what you need to do, but actually helping the processes to change and the people who work with this technology and who buy the technology or sell the technology to be aware of this and to give them tools so the use will be ethical. Yeah? Apart from that, I'm also one of the founders of a Observatory for Social and Ethical Impact of Artificial Intelligence, which is a non-profit organization that brings together professionals, companies, public administrations to help that the use of this technology across all sectors, across all economies in our lives has positive impact rather than a potential negative impact. And lastly, I'm also a board member of the Carbon Disclosure Project, which is a large NGO on climate change reporting and very relevant in the space of the European taxonomy and those kinds of things. So in the end, my interest is mostly applying technology for the greater good and doing it in an ethical way. I've been all my life in commercial and operational functions, but the last years I've decided to look to a broader picture. Several of the experiences I've written down in 3 books, which of course you are free to look at, some in Spanish and one in English.
Thank you, Richard. Manuela, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Hi. So I'm Manuela Battaglini, very well pronounced, by the way. I am from the Canary Islands. My father is Italian. That's the reason why of my accent and my surname. So I'm a lawyer, and what I do is work on digital ethics. So mainly what we have is, let's sort of say, after our first research about transparency, that is my focus, automated decision-making and personal profiling and the social impact. So after our first research, basic and focus on this, what we did is not only talking about the problems, but the solutions too. And then we figure out that we described a method in order to help companies to be ethical, mainly the social impact, not only talking about the law, but talking about the ethical decisions in every stage, where we can talk about this process later. My focus is AI and the impact on democracy, on human dignity, on human autonomy and freedom. And on the other hand, what I do is I am researcher in governance that is based in San Sebastian. And it's researching about the impact of technology on democracy.
Thank you, Manuela.
Yeah.
Javier.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for inviting me and having the pleasure to share this morning with this panelist and with you all. So my name is Javier Camacho. I used to be an engineer, I have to confess, in a former life. I also worked, in terms of confessions, I worked for many years in the corporate world, if I may say. And then I became a consultant, also from different companies, different sizes in different countries and sectors. And finally, I ended up doing my PhD in business ethics, which is the field where I have been researching, working, teaching, exploring for the last 10 years or so. More recently, 4 years ago, I guess, my kind of, engineer background kicked in again, and I started looking into this field or the overlap between business ethics, artificial intelligence, and decision-making in businesses and organizations. And that's basically what I do now. I do research. I have, we have published a number of articles and also one book for which Richard was our prologist. And pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Javier. Richard, a question for you. Can you beat my rudimentary definition of artificial intelligence in plain words?
Well, actually, I think the definition of artificial intelligence is quite simple, yeah? If it is for explaining what it is. I mean, artificial intelligence is the activity that works on making machines do things or behave that if the people would behave so, it would require intelligence. Yeah? So the example you gave about ChatGPT obviously is an artificial intelligence because it answers questions, quite difficult questions. I did many tests myself and I'm surprised how a machine can give you that answer. Yeah? It's not so much about what's happening behind the hood, so under the cover, but it's what you observe. No? Now that's a plain definition of AI and that works well for people to understand. However, the definition of AI is much more important. When we start talking about regulation, then it will define what falls under regulation and what does not fall under regulation. And you can see that because the European Commission started a few years ago about writing about artificial intelligence. They came up with ethical guidelines, with excellence report. Now there is a regulation. And if you track the definition of AI, it's constantly changing. Not because in general people don't understand what it is, but it means if you apply the law to it, what is in it and what is not out of it. If you take the definition of 2 years ago and the first version of the regulation, of the proposal for the regulation, and you take today the revision, it has nothing to do with each other. But it's still artificial intelligence.
We'll speak more about regulation in a moment. I wanted to go to Manuela, but first perhaps, Javier, you can share with us how is artificial intelligence used in business? Why our business community should be paying attention to what we are talking about?
Yeah, well, I think it, well, definitely it's here to stay. I think usually people in this field, they talk about the winter of there's been a number of winters in AI, and we are living now springtime. And apparently, this is here to stay. I mean, all forecasts, number of companies, they talk about many trillions of dollars of business to be generated in the next few years around artificial intelligence. But definitely, artificial intelligence applications are already being used in businesses, and there are mainly two drivers for that, which is kind of the classic business drivers: to sell more or to save costs. And number of applications, if we look of the areas of a business, marketing and sales, well, it's a very good tool to boost revenue based on product recommendation. In classic, I was a salesman once, and we always use those concepts of upsell and cross-sell. Well, that can be done wonderfully by artificial intelligence. Just take Amazon, for example. We can think of chatbots to ease the process of customer service or improve the customer service of many companies. We could think of content creation, as with the example that Enrique was mentioning, which are the keywords, which are the frequency for the ads. We can have, actually in some big Spanish companies, that is what they're doing, so that we have a really personalized experience when we log into a web page. We are not talking about banners. We are just talking about which products, which kind of web page are shown to every and each individual, which has also some ethical challenges. We're talking about finance in terms of fraud detection, in terms of loans, in terms of improvements in cybersecurity. We are talking about the human resources area, recruitment, which probably has been one of the areas that has attracted more attention as well from an ethical perspective, but we could think of talent retention, talent development. All that information gathered by a company can be a really powerful tool for the company in terms of the workforce. And of course, we can talk about operations. We can talk about predictive maintenance. We can talk about manufacturing, fault detection. We can talk about not just product companies, but services companies in the legal field, in the compliance field, applications that can kind of prepare contracts, review contracts, legal contracts, and detect, highlight specific issues, process automation. So there's not infinite, but there is a very great number of possibilities by which businesses can be better business and can make more business using artificial intelligence.
Okay, this links very, very well with the next question I have. I mean, I like to tell my students that the purpose of a company is something more than making a profit, right? That the companies are big players that can actually have an impact in society, should have an impact in society. So the purpose of a company should go beyond making a profit, should be making an impact in society. In this respect, Manuela, to what extent do you think that artificial intelligence can help business not only become more productive or get better results, but actually have a positive impact in society?
Well, I think that, first of all, I would like to say that talking about artificial intelligence, we have to consider that artificial intelligence is a science, is a technology too, in a sense that as a science, it has to follow in order to make new tools, new innovative tools. It has to go through the scientific method, first of all. Second, as a technology, what it does is trial and error until you make a new technology, and then you are adding all these new tools to a box that is growing and growing, but it's a very difficult process in order to make a new tool in artificial intelligence. So that's first. Second, we are talking about here, I think, two different topics that are business and ethics. They don't belong to the same category. So this is something that we have to have very clear. Money and benefits and ethics, they belong to different categories. They cannot compete. So that's the thing, always is going to win economical benefits, that's for sure. But the thing is that the ethical application of the ethical measures is going to be a trend from now on because of law. So ethical or digital ethics is going to be a trend because of law, because you don't want to pay the fines. But talking about a little bit broad or big picture, what we have here is, what I would like to talk about, three problems that we have right now, and let's see what solution we can find. So in a broad perspective, on a big picture perspective, what we have is a problem, a business model with the tech giants, for example, and many other companies that they are big companies, but maybe with the tech giants, what we have is a power problem, in a sense that is power concentrated just in a few actors, that these are the tech giants, plus that they have unlawful business models because they are not legal business models, okay? We have to have clear that, first of all. And this power is added to data. So this data can be sold to big players, to governments, but not only to governments, but they can be sold to big retail companies and other companies that they are around here, around us. Another problem that we have is in the public sector, because automated decision-making and personal profiling is used by the public sector too. And the problem that we have is that public administration, they are using technology as the private sector. And that is a big problem for citizens, okay? So one of the big problems is using administrative decisions. So when you go to your municipality or other public administration, ask some permission or whatever, and then an algorithm make the decision. This goes against the rule of law because it cannot be explained. So we have a big problem here. So how public administration is going to use this technology. So which is going to be the impact? And of course, the impact has to be positive. And which has to be the impact? Solving human problems. That is the positive social impact that, in my opinion, is the only parameter that I see when I'm talking to a company, or public administration. Are you solving a human problem or not? Or are you only thinking about, your own benefit? That is, on the other hand, if you're a company, on the other hand, it's fair enough. But let's see which is the impact. And the third problem that I see here, I was working, that I forgot to say that in the Charter of Digital Rights, I was one of the Spanish government. I was one of the 5 leaders, and I was working on ethical considerations. And one of the principles was principle of non-exclusion. That means that those people, those citizens, those persons that decide not to be involved in the digitalization system of society, or those people that have problems, economical problems, digital literacy or whatever, cannot be excluded from society, cannot be excluded from have any relationship with private companies or mainly public administration. So we have to take into account not only that we have to grow in digitalization, we have to see what dead bodies we are leaving aside, that there are many.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask you one thing regarding this. Do you agree, Javier and Richard, with the view of Manuela that business and ethics belong in different fields? Is the expression business ethics an oxymoron?
Not money. Money and ethics.
Money and ethics.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Business, no. Money.
Okay.
Well, of course, money makes the world go round, still. Yeah? I think it's, in the long term, only profit is unsustainable. We see where we are in the world, what we have done as a humanity. So I think there needs to become a change of understanding what wealth and profit means beyond economic profit.
I would tend to say, I would tend to not disagree, agree to disagree.
Don't disagree, please. We
Something
have to disagree.
like that. I think you can make money, probably even more money, being ethical. When talking to business owners, this hype about sustainability. There's nothing more sustainable than a business, than a company. Because when you set up a company and you go to the notary and you sign the deeds of association, that's a kind of a contract. That's a contract between the shareholders to do something, not to make money. It doesn't say so. Okay? They need to make money to survive. But it's a contract with no due date. So a company is meant to live forever. A company is meant to live over the founders, the owners. So that's really sustainable. And in my point of view, what I found is, ethics is everywhere. I think ethics is predominant in business community, because otherwise we won't be here by now, right? So I tend to think that businesses do things in a good way, in a good manner, in an ethical way, most of them. And of course, there's always some scandals, in the news and all that. But I tend to say that money ethics are kind of a human nature, and they can co-live with no problem.
You wanted to add something?
Of course, they have, of course. But I mean that from a categorical point of view, from even philosophical point of view, they don't belong the same category. That's the only thing that I want to say. It's pretty difficult sometimes to apply ethics because of company's culture or because money runs the companies. You want to have your benefits.
Yeah, I tend to think that.
But do I agree with you that being ethical? So sorry, I don't know what happened. Maybe okay. But I do agree with you that being ethical, is in the long term, is going to be an advantage, completely advantage for the company. Yeah, that for sure.
Richard, did you want to add?
Yeah, I wanted to make some comments on what Manuela said, because you asked us for a positive impact.
Yes.
and basically see answers with, you have to avoid negative impact. Yeah? So I think there are two narratives in if you think about AI and business and ethics. One is to avoid negative impact, which is only part of doing it in the ethical way, and looking broader than just profits and optimization, taking the human factor always in the loop. But then there is a whole other area where you can actually use the technology actively to create a positive impact. Yeah? So examples for those are, you can use a lot of data and technology let's talk about pandemics and COVID. Yeah? So there were many activities in AI across the world where this technology helped to predict where the virus would spread, or it could understand better where there were large mobility movements of crowds of people that could lead later on to a hotspot of cases. There have been many studies about how you can use this technology to manage better the results of natural disasters, which we all know with climate change are increasing at an exponential rate. This technology can really help to prevent, not so much the response, but also the preparedness of those things. Forced migration is a problem across the world, in the Middle East, in South America, also because of climate change. The people who lose their livelihood, they are forced to move to other things. So there's a lot of technology that can help. Yeah? So I think focusing on this is very important. Unfortunately, and then we come back to business, who is going to invest in those projects? Yeah? So companies invest in projects with technology to optimize their business, to become more profitable, and even to be more sustainable, even more energy efficient. Yeah? So it's not only profit, it's also positive. But who wants to invest in reducing poverty across the world? Yeah? Today, those are big philanthropists and maybe some public funding, but let's say the big money is still not there. I think that's a problem we still have to solve.
I'm going to stay with you on some of what you said. We sense at IE that students that graduate from this university, or people who come for a master, are more and more interested in making a contribution to the world, and that they will end up working for companies, right? So in reality, when you said, who's going to invest in this? Well, probably companies will realize that they need to make companies, to create companies that are actually looking towards society. So how can we use artificial intelligence, and Javier mentioned compliance, to actually improve compliance and sustainability? You have been very involved in projects, you work with the compliance team, but what's the interaction, considering that this is an observatory on sustainable compliance culture?
But the interaction between artificial intelligence and compliance is multiple, yeah? So on the one hand, those AI applications exist really many years in terms of compliance and about whether you are allowed to send over or share some information with outside the company. Of course, all these emails are scanned using text mining, text analytics, artificial intelligence, natural language processing to find if there is content in an email that cannot be shared or in a document. Yeah? So, and this is already 20-year-old, yeah? This kind of application. So this is where AI is used for improving compliance. Yeah? Of course, it also leads a bit to employee surveillance, yeah? Because people are watched in what they write. Yeah? So there's also an ethical aspect on this. But then if you look at how you can implement AI and use AI in an ethical way in a company, then of course compliance is in the loop. Because usually today in most companies, if there is something about ethical AI, it's a voluntary, it's a voluntary thing. So based by enthusiast employees who think they have to make a difference and want to avoid important negative effects. There is also the ESG departments, which are trying to push those kinds of the ethical use of artificial intelligence. But in the end, if you want to make sure that it's really happening, then you need a function like compliance, which joins the journey and then is part of this journey and actually helps implementing this on a daily basis, such that there is also accountability of the use. It's one thing to say something, but it's other thing if something goes wrong, that you know who is accountable for it, and you have the evidence to show that you've at least done all the things you should have done in order to avoid it. Now, if it still happens, well, that always can happen, but at least you are thinking about this by design.
Can you deal with the reverse side of the coin? You mentioned artificial intelligence and compliance. Instead of how compliance should kind of monitor artificial intelligence, how can artificial intelligence help compliance?
Okay, yeah, that's a very good question. So, yeah, I would like to throw something else on the table, for the discussion. When we talk about artificial intelligence, I think your definitions were great, but I think artificial intelligence from a business opportunity perspective is much more than that. So we could say that there's like three big building blocks. One is the algorithms, another one is the data, and another one is the people. And I think that could apply, Manuela might correct me, but I think that could apply to both businesses, corporations, and also to public administrations, in changing people for citizens, maybe. Out of those three big building blocks, algorithm, data, and people, there's a survey I just checked from New Vantage Partners, a survey made to data leaders in 2021. And most people involved, they say that the real challenge, or they say 92% of the people in the survey said that the real challenge is not about the algorithm. It's not about technology. It's about the people. It's about the processes, the culture. And we could include there as well the compliance, the integrity and compliance culture of the company. So there is a risk when we talk about AI that we think that AI is the main thing or the algorithm is the main thing. And it's not. We have this image of the iceberg in which when we talk about AI systems, the tip of the iceberg would be probably the algorithm, but the rest is really what matters. And the rest is the culture of the company, the people in the company, the citizens, the rights, the processes, the governance, the compliance system, the story of the company, the market position, all that. That's really the important thing. So we should not overestimate the algorithm themselves. So company mindset is the most important thing. If the company has the right mindset, artificial intelligence can make wonders, also in terms of compliance. Additionally, there's like three areas, three key topics where it is true that artificial intelligence might challenge a little bit compliance, and one is might challenge or help, depending on how we look at it. One is cybersecurity, which I think is top concern for CEOs and board of directors in any company right now. And artificial intelligence might help and might be, a kind of a headache. Another one is addressing new business opportunities out of these possibilities. And those new business opportunities have a direct impact in compliance in terms of new risks to be managed, of new stakeholders to be identified, or new processes to be and controls to be developed. And the other one is that you need to move all your company, including compliance. I don't know if probably the word is no longer adaptation, it's more of an evolution, but you have to move a company. And you all know that moving a company of 50 people, even physically, might be not that hard, but moving a company of 10,000 people, 30,000 people, it takes time, okay? It takes time and effort and a strategy, and you have to be clear on that.
Thank you, Javier. Manuel, this is getting very exciting, right? The opportunities, etc. But there are some challenges. What challenges do you identify from a legal and from an ethical perspective?
Yeah, well, as I said before, the main challenge are the people too, in a sense that they can be the drivers for the more ethical situation, but they can be the drivers for the more non-ethical situation too. I mean, culture. And on the other hand, as I said, benefits. It is, I mean, sometimes applying digital ethics is not that profitable than if we are not applying digital ethics. Said this, what I want to say is something important about how these automated decision-making processes work, because this is very important, and it's going to link what you said, guys. And first of all, is that everything started when you have some people that you are going, your technology is going to impact some individuals or group of individuals. So first of all, from an ethical point of view, the most important thing is to study the needs of these individuals, of group of individuals, in terms of how can I help these people through my business, through my technology. The second step, it would be the data collection, where automated decision-making is made of main four kind of data, that they are personal data, direct personal data, that are the ones that we fill a form, for example. Observed data, one of the most dangerous data, because these are the ones that they are taking from us in a direct way, but not in a voluntary way. We're talking about the Wi-Fi tracking, we're talking about browser tracking, we're talking about face recognition technology, we're talking about many other technologies that they are tracking from our devices without noticing. Anonymous data, no problem with them. And then there is third-party data. These are the data brokers that they are taking all our information that is public. They are making profiling from people, and they can be bought by banks, they can be bought by insurance companies, they can be bought for recruiters, they can be bought for governments. Then it comes here, in this part, comes the transparency. The transparency is how to tell to the users how are you going to use this information. What are you going to do with this information? GDPR, the Carta Magna of Transparency, articles from 13 to 15, notification rights and data access. But here, the great question is, which data can I access being a user? So here came the next steps as data storage. So data storage, all there has a call strategy around security, around cybersecurity, and then comes the training set, the automated decision making, then comes the profiling, and then the social impact, which is the big problem that we have here. Between the data storage and the training set, there's a great stopper, a legal stopper. We're talking about intellectual property and rights and trade secret directive. So these are great legal stoppers that allow companies to be opaque. Okay? So when we were making this, is something happening with my microphone? Okay. So the thing is that when we were making this diagram that starts with a human being and finishes with a human being, we said, okay, but here there is something with this great legal stoppers. What can we do in order to figure out not only we cannot access to the data that our profiles are made. We only can access until the databases. But the thing is that how can we circumvent this legal stoppers? So we figure out that the people are exactly the answer. So we gave a step back and said, okay, let's start not by the individual and group of individual needs. Let's start by the commissioning part. When you have a problem or something that you want to achieve through technology, and you start to have meetings with the developers, with the AI group, with outsourcing. So this is the part where a problem is the problem definition. So I want to use the technology for one, for one aim, for one goal. The second is outsourcing. and then the impact assessment that a company has to do, or the previous impact assessment that a company has to do before starting developing any technology. Some of them are mandatory, like data protection impact assessment. Some of them they're not, like human rights impact assessment. That, talking about law, is going to be very interesting to see if the human rights impact assessment is going to be enough in order to detect the systemic risk that Article 34.2 of DSA is talking about, the tech giants or not. That is going to be something that we will see along the years. So starting by the commissioning stage and dividing the whole process into stages, we can see which mistakes are being made in every. So it's much easier for the companies in order to figure out what mistakes have been done. And if we start by the people, by all, and making this a stage process, we can keep record all the documentation and reports that have been done in order to see which were all the solutions and all the solutions to every stage. Sometimes the problem is not that we use the bad technology. Sometimes the problem is that the person who made the decision don't understand technology. And then they are using a technology in order to make a decision that technology cannot be done. So many times we don't have a transparency or accountability problem in automated decision making. Many times we have a legitimacy problem. And that it means that technology is not able to make the decision that it was made for. So for me, these are the main problems.
Thank you. Richard, Javier, is there anything you want to add to what Manuela said? Or do you have a different perspective about what are the main challenges?
Well, I think Manuela focused a lot on privacy-related, personal data-related challenges. These are very important. I think there are a few other ones as well. If you speak about companies, businesses, what are the main challenges for business? One of them was Javier already said. Culture is very important to make it happen. But on the ethical side, you also have bias and undesired discrimination, because the algorithms learn from data. If the data is biased, you end up also having discrimination in the results, like gender discrimination, discrimination against race. These are all the things that we read in the press about this technology. I think the correct level of autonomy to a system. So if you speak about autonomic decision making, there are different models. You can have a human in the loop that always so there comes a recommendation, but it's in the end always a person that takes the decision, like in the medical factor for diagnosis, or if you apply it to justice, then it's always a judge. But you also things, if you do AI for recommendation of movies, of course there is nobody pressing a button, this is a correct recommendation, it's not, it's completely autonomous. So it's very important to understand what is the impact of people in assigning the right level of autonomy. So companies can just overlook that and just do something without looking at this. Opaque decisions, transparency was already mentioned, it's very important. But then there's also liability. So if you use this, something goes wrong. If this is an autonomous system, so who is liable for the damages? European Commission has recently issued a new liability law adapted to artificial intelligence, which is also interesting. So in this new law, it's the company that has to demonstrate that the AI system is working correctly, and it's not, let's say, the victim that has to demonstrate that the system was working incorrectly. So many different challenges, but they're not unsolvable.
So I would just, I agree, I fully agree with Manuela and Richard. Just thinking forward, I think one of the key challenges from a business perspective is how to scale these applications. You know, that's kind of okay, we've got a pilot and it works nice, but now I want to deploy this on a massive scale for my customer base, from many countries, for whatever. And that's kind of the actual challenge, I'd say. In different geographies, it is different. So there's also some recommendations. There's a couple of articles from Harvard and also from Boston Consulting Group about how to do that, and they did also an analysis of successful companies that have scaled AI systems. And they came up with the conclusion that those companies that were really successful in scaling these systems, they follow kind of a 10-20-70 rule. And they invested, because we're talking about investment as well, they invested 10% in the algorithm of the overall money, 20% in the technology, I will come back to that, and 70% back again on people, processes, culture, etc. When you talk to companies, for my research, I've been talking to some companies here in Spain, and they're not so much concerned about the algorithm. Many are more concerned with the data infrastructure. So they say, yeah, we can have this wonderful algorithm. There are many, open source tools. The problem is that our data infrastructure is not as good, and it's kind of a little bit outdated, or we just, and we will have to renew that. And that's a huge, that's a big investment in order to scale this up. Practical recommendations. So what are companies doing in order to tackle down some of these challenges from a practical perspective? Number one, and again, not everyone is doing the same, but some good practices. One is to map your existing applications. So you say, okay, let's try to analyze which kind of product services we are currently doing, and identify in which of them we are using any sort of AI systems. Okay. Number two, compliance-wise, once you've got that mapping, is to do some sort of risk assessment, maybe following the UE guidelines, or maybe following internal guidelines from the company. But you have to highlight in which of those applications you might have some problems related to what Manuela, privacy related, or some of the others, bias, explainability, transparency, responsibility, liability, you might have. Then you have to prioritize, just as usual compliance style. Number three, the ethicists used to say that, in terms of individual ethics, one key thing is to recognize your own moral strength. But companies have to do that as well. Most companies, again, have a strong culture, have an ethical culture. Most companies, talking about big corporations, they have a code of ethics. They have been working for quite some time now in developing the ethical dimension of the culture. So this is not a drastic change. They just have maybe to adapt the code of ethics to these new digital ethical challenges, but there is a lot of work done. So they should leverage on that. That's probably the good kind of a bootstrapping strategy. That's a good thing to do. And together with that, of course, they will have to focus then on the governance. And I would say that, again, most companies, they don't have to make big changes in terms of governance. They have, maybe in data governance they do, but in terms of governance for the company, they don't have to they're already there. So just with that, some incremental changes they could adapt. And then the big change, we come back to the talent challenge. Okay, they might have to add some new talent, some people that are able to translate, for the rest of the company. They have to train, they have to induce that cultural change somehow.
Just to add very little bit on top of the scalability of using this technology across companies, I can recommend you read my book. It's called A Data-Driven Company, 21 Lessons to Create Value from AI and Data in Large Organizations, which has recently been translated into Spanish. And that gives very practical guidelines and experiences of many companies in how do you scale this from starting small to really being a fully data-driven company.
Thank you. Manuela, yeah.
There is a very interesting tool, and I think that is a very powerful tool that the community of data protection is talking to competition community, where mainly in, for example, I'm going to go to another place right now, but I want to go a little bit far away to come back again and talk about this tool. That is the mergers between big companies, like when Facebook, for example, bought Instagram or WhatsApp, or when Google bought Fitbit, for example. And then Digicom was say kind of, oh, there's not any problem because they are in different sectors. One is advertisement, the other one is health, or this is about pictures and whatever, messaging and social networks. This is not a problem. The problem is not advertising. The problem is that the tech giant goes to health sector and then merge all the databases. Or these mergers, what they do is that they have the problems that they are just merging these databases. And of course, here, the great tool that the data protection community has, and it can be applied in the Digicom, they can apply in all these cases, in order being ethical, is the purpose limitation principle. The purpose limitation principle is the strongest tool that data protection community has, in a sense that, okay, you bought all these companies and you merged these companies, but you have to use the data just for the purpose that you are telling your user you're going to use your how's it called, your information. Now we have had sentence that said that advertisement or personalized advertisement by Facebook has been declared illegal if it is made through contract. It has to be through consent. So now, from now on, and the fine is going to be, we don't know, it's still defined, but they are talking about in American counting, 2 billion years. So the thing is that it's really high. It's a really high one. So the thing is that until now we haven't had any opting in, opting out in this system. That is what the law says. But we're still not talking about the legal basis. What I'm talking about is the purpose limitation has been from the beginning the biggest and the strongest tool from the data protection community. That and that can be applied to any company that use big data. And of course, technology.
We're going to open the floor for questions of our audience. But going back to your point, what are the initiatives that at the European Union level are being taken to regulate, if any, all these things? And to what extent do you think that this is useful? Because you mentioned now this opt-in or opt-out. Well, one of the main consequences of GDPR is that now we have to read longer statements of data privacy policies that we check, we sign without reading, because it would take years of our days or months of our time to read all the things that we approve, right? Is this really effective? Does it really make sense? Is regulation just protecting companies instead of protecting individuals that blindly sign this kind of consent? Right? So what are the initiatives that are coming, and how do you think they really protect individuals? Richard?
Well, I think there exists, of course, the GDPR, which is a regulation for personal data. Of course, there are many AI applications that don't do any personal data.
Is this not just a check the box, right? I comply,
No,
then I can do whatever I want because people accepted it without reading it.
Of course, that's a challenge, but it's not always the case. Yeah?
Right.
So there are many things of the GDPR that companies have to take seriously.
Sure.
And one of the things is the consent.
Yeah.
And the other one is the legitimate interest, which is a very gray. Yeah?
Of course, this, yeah.
So for legitimate interest, for data, you don't have to ask permission, but then who decides what is legitimate?
Exactly.
So it's a gray area. So there are many challenges, but I think it is a good start to put privacy at the base of every company. But there is the AI Act. Yeah? It's the new regulation for in the European Commission. That is a horizontal regulation, risk-based. Says unacceptable risk, high risk, limited risk, low risk. Low risk is free of any rules. Limited risk has a transparency obligation. So for instance, if you do something with GPT, you are by law required to write something, this is generated by a machine. If you talk to an assistant, digital assistant on the phone, they have to warn you in case of confusion, this you are talking to a machine. If you make a deep fake, whatever, you have to write, this is a deep fake. Otherwise, you are against the law, and you can pay up to 4% or 2% of your revenue. High risk. So 8 areas of high risk are identified: hiring people, firing people, facial recognition, or in general biometric identification. So what is downstairs is an application that I am sure IE has just bought from the market, but from the regulation on, you cannot do that. You have to go through a series of steps, which is about quality of data, data governance, risk management, bias, human intervention, whatever, and you have to certify this system before you can use it, and actually your provider can sell it to you. Yeah? So that's another one. Access to essential services, very broad. Yeah? Social security, public universities, public hospitals. If you use AI for that, that has to be regulated. Now, of course, the question is, what is exactly high risk? And indeed, the European Commission is already discussing with the European Parliament, the Council of Europe, for more than a year about what is then high risk. Because if it's about hiring, or then if I just get a suggestion, hire those people out of those 100 CVs that you registered, then is that just some information and I take the decision as a person, or is this really the person's taking over all the recommendations? Yeah, there is, they say, if the result of AI is accessory to the decision, it's not high risk, even though the application is high risk. But if it is not accessory, then it becomes high risk. So very gray area again. So this is an important regulation that's coming on. Then there is the Data Act, which is also a regulation of the European Commission, which is about data sharing, business to business, but also especially business to government. Yeah? Data, companies will be obliged to share some data if that's needed for public emergencies, like healthcare, pandemics, natural disasters.
Of connected devices, yeah. Data Act.
Data Act, yeah.
Yeah. Connected devices.
And others as well, yeah. So it is related because there you also have a mix. You have to share data, but what about GDPR, consent, how if it's shared on? And there's also a new machinery regulation, which relates very much to AI. If you have factories and predictive maintenance and all the industrial applications where there's lots of machineries that use AI, and those machineries, if they are, let's say they call safety components of critical systems, then they also are regulated.
Thank you. Manuela, your 2 cents on regulation?
Yeah, well, the DMA and DSA are very important here too. DSA is mainly content moderation law from the tech giants and, well, social media platforms, online marketplaces, and all online services that are dealing with third-party content. So there is also liability here is the most important thing, or innovation, legal innovation. There is a special regime for the so-called very large online platforms and very large search engine in the section 5 of DSA. And it imposed new innovation risk management obligation for content moderation in these articles 35 and 34 and 35, that I have to say something that is very important because, first of all, there's a legal definition of content moderation, first of all. It regulates terms and conditions, but something that is very important to me is that from the article 34 that just a second, because I wrote a lot about DSA that for me is very important. I'm not going to read it all otherwise. I'm 30 minutes here talking about this law. So in my opinion, the 34 2 that is talking about dealing with negative effects for the exercise of fundamental rights. This is very important because what they do is that they talk about human dignity, private and family life, data protection, freedom of expression, non-discrimination, rights of the child, high-level consumer protection. So we are talking about a law that is talking about the social impact. First of all, what AI Act is not, that is only regulating technology and lose completely the context of application. That's one of the issues. But second,
regulated the technology.
okay,
Regulating the use of
The application.
no, not application.
Right.
the use of the technology.
In this sense, what is regulated, Javier?
No, I want to finish. And then here, there is something very important. There are two fundamental rights that they are, freedom of expression and privacy. These are two big rights that are going to compete here. And of course, how to mitigate this. The DMA is another regulation that is very important here. And the DMA is a market regulation, mainly. So, and here is, we have to see whether in the future, if it's going to be a market where monopolies are going to be regulated, or is going to regulate, or is going to achieve a more fair market for all the companies that they are playing in this context. And this is very important in DMA that there is here the purpose limitation principle too, but this principle that is very strictly, so to say, in GDPR is not that much in the DMA, because it says that they're going to need consent, but they no say for every one of the legal basis or every one of the purposes. So it's a general term. So maybe we're going to need again years and years of litigations in order to figure out how to how to define this principle here in this law.
Thanks.
And then the Governance Act. There are these big five laws.
Thanks. And Javier, I was watching the other day a very interesting interview to Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, who has just written a book on this with Henry Kissinger. One of the interesting things that he said is that the approach to regulation in the US is different. First they innovate and then they regulate. And he says, well, in Europe it is different. We regulate first, and then this may actually limit innovation. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, the two sides of a coin. I would probably target the relationship between ethics and law, which I think is, more within my field. And that's why we always say that, I always say at least, that ethics comes before law, and ethics goes beyond law. Because when you talk about, you talk with companies about this, they say, well, one of the key problems, one of the key challenges we face as companies to adopt AI systems is the uncertainty regarding regulation. Because, we know, there's some clouds there, so we don't know whether it's going to rain or not. So we wait. We wait because we don't know. We don't know whether to wear our umbrella, what kind of, is it going to be a heavy rain? Is it going to be, at the end, no rain at all? So I think the key problem with this, I don't think it's so much regarding innovation, okay, which is another issue probably in the European culture. I think the problem is uncertainty. And companies say, well, we don't know really which way to go until the regulation is finished. And that's a problem. And I think that's where ethics might, come in much before. I mean, long before. Because you could say, okay, no matter what the regulation is, we know that we should act according to certain principles, or we should act according to certain guidelines. We should review, we should establish some milestones. Maybe we should have to change the design process for our products and services. Maybe we need to update our compliance program. Maybe we need to be ahead of that regulation.
Thank you, Javier. So we'll come back for final remarks. Perhaps our audience has some questions or comments or... Yes, Manuel. Okay, so yeah.
Hola.
Hola.
Me voy a expresar en español,
Bien.
porque soy italiana y me siento más cómoda.
Muy bien.
Me llamo Hilaria, trabajo en el sector legal y soy exalumnilla. Tengo dos preguntas. La primera es, ¿podemos realmente hablar de inteligencia artificial? Me explico. Las herramientas que actualmente tenemos realmente analizan datos y recompilan datos, pero aún no interpretan. No sabes diferenciar, por ejemplo, entre lo que está bien y lo que está mal. Por eso yo me pregunto, ¿estamos realmente ante inteligencia artificial? Esta es la primera pregunta. La segunda pregunta que tengo es el tema de los sesgos. Al final, como estamos ante esa herramienta que responden a reglas, fórmulas, algoritmos, hay una persona detrás que prepara, confecciona estos algoritmos y las personas tenemos sesgos. Por lo tanto, por ejemplo, volviendo al ejemplo de Amazon, cuando yo compro en Amazon, Amazon sabe que yo soy europea, que soy caucásica, que tengo entre 35 y 40 años, tiene mis hábitos. Por lo tanto, sobre la base de este perfil, me propone una compra. Y mi pregunta es, de esta forma, ¿estamos influenciando los hábitos de las personas? ¿Realmente las máquinas están generando influencia o cambios sobre la base de parámetros? ¿Es esto ético? Estas son mis dos preguntas.
Muchas gracias, Hilaria.
¿Respondo en español o en inglés?
In English, please. Yeah.
In English. Can we really talk about artificial intelligence? Well, if you say, can we really talk about intelligence? Maybe not. I just explained in the beginning what is artificial intelligence. Yeah? So it makes machines do that if we see them, we think it is intelligent. Yeah? It doesn't, so I think it's much more important to think about what's the usefulness of this technology rather than to discuss do we call this intelligence or not. That is a philosophical question and there are no right answers. Yeah? It's just opinions, etc. It's a good question, interesting for debate, but not really pragmatical in using this. Yeah? That's my first answer to the question.
Let's go.
Okay.
I see you smiling, Javier.
No, just to add to that, in a very simple answer, I think if you change the word intelligence for conscience, then it's not. I mean, there's no such thing as artificial conscience so far, right? That's okay.
Yeah, I cannot understand. What it does is interpret some information. That's what it does, this chat that you were talking about, this interpretation. And of course, I would like to know which are the sources that use this machine, that if humans are using, okay, you're telling me this information, which are the sources that you are based your information, so this is the same, which are the sources that this machine is based. So that's first of all. And then the bias, of course, we are biased. But the thing is that in the process that I said before, starting by the commissioning stage, where all the information, all the human, the word making the information, focusing on the problem and etc., we can see all the mistakes. And we can see all the bias, and we can see everything in order to circumvent whether there are these legal stoppers. But yes, of course. And this is not only the bias, it's the discrimination too, but it's doing sometimes on purpose. Amazon, for example, in this case, I have a lot of cases because in my blog, for example, I have written a lot of posts about discriminating and bias situations in the world. But in this, just one piece of information about Amazon, it can increase the price in 200% depending on where you are located. For example, people that live in the countryside, 200% more because for them it's much more difficult to take the car and go to a store to buy the item. So things like that. So yeah, of course. we are biased, but sometimes we are biased on purpose.
Thank you. Yeah. Let's go to the question on bias.
Yeah. So I think definitely there is bias, and we are influenced by the use of artificial intelligence, no doubt. You can't say this is not ethical, because it depends on for what. Of course, if it's for what just Manuela just said, I personally think it's non-ethical. If you use it for polarization of societies to influence democratic elections, I don't think it's ethical. If you use it to increase engagement, young female, and the result they have more anorexia, I don't think it's ethical. But then if you use it for personal treatments in cancer, which can improve much more recovery, I think it is ethical, and there are many things that are ethical. So I think there are even more things that are ethical that are non-ethical. So you can't give a generic answer to that question.
Yeah, I would like to add that yes, it's true, and for me the parameter is solving human problems and having as a parameter human dignity. If you are preserving human dignity, then, in my opinion, that's okay.
I don't know if there are more questions.
Okay.
I don't want to...
Any other? Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you for the talk, firstly, by the way. I wanted to ask you, right now, artificial intelligence, machine learning, this is all at the forefront of technology, and it takes a lot of programming and professional technical expertise. But perhaps now we're seeing, just as you mentioned before, with ChatGPT, and even further than that, there's DALL-E, which is generative AI for imagery. Now you have millions of people generating their own images, generating their own text. How long do you think it's going to be until the average person can start their own AI business or start making their own AI models? In the future, how long do you think that will take?
I don't know. Their own AI model?
Yeah, so...
A citizen, an individual, you mean?
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, like, now you have these businesses that use AI to integrate different platforms. You have businesses that use AI to gather data, and this takes a lot of technical expertise and professional expertise. But the point I'm making is that now it seems like it's more widely available to people.
So you say AI as a service, that you can simply use.
Yeah, exactly. And so like no code.
I mean, there are, so ChatGPT comes from GPT-3, and there are already many businesses that run on top of GPT-3. So this is small businesses that do not make any investment. They just pay for the queries they make to GPT-3. And so that's obviously that's going to increase exponentially. Look at all the students that come from this university. If they want to do something with AI, of course, you have a lock-in into the big tech. So either you go to Google, to Amazon, to Meta, or to OpenAI or Microsoft, because there are not a lot of other services yet. But this will grow. And it will be very easy to set up a business and fail quickly. The problem if you do it on this, it's black box. So you don't know how GPT-3 works. And if your content that you generate has a certain impact, for instance, if you want to do news services, well, you can create big problems because you're not controlling what it is. So then you need to have somebody in the loop who checks. But there are maybe, if you just want to generate a conversation to learn a different language, well, maybe it's good enough, because if it says stupid things, it doesn't really matter so much, because you just need to have a conversation. So it depends on where you use it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Javier, Manuela, no? Yes, there is another question there, please.
Hey, my name is Francini. I'm studying here. I have a question regarding the AI Act. In Article 14, they talk about human oversight, and my question is if it's possible. Like, I mean, they say that they want to put the human in the loop, but also we humans, we want to understand what's in the black box. So would you think that it's possible? And if it is possible, would it like comply with the purpose?
Well, it's very today is an academic. It's not defined what is human supervising. It's a very difficult definition because a lot of topics and issues come on the table. The institution organism that has been closer to this definition has been the European Data Protection Board, that it has said that human supervisor, more than the definition, said what it has to do, where it says a supervisor, the human supervisor should contemplate every case independently, should contemplate the results independently. It cannot say it is okay if the machine says it is okay. So it has just to see the impact. And it has to take into account additional information. So these are the 4 requirements that the European Data Protection Board is talking when it's human, with the human supervision. And it's true, it's one of the things that is very slightly defined in all the piece of legislation. But we think, I think that we have to work more on this. This mainly happens in the automated decision making that works for supported decisions, that these are the more controversial ones. In order, I want to make a decision, and I'm going to use AI in order to see what this decision that I already made is kind of accurate. So there's not that human supervision there, that it has to be always with these 4 steps, let's sort of say.
I think it's important to remember this is only for high-risk applications, yeah. And if you want to talk about what it means in practice, yeah. So, for instance, providers of AI systems, human oversight means that they need to build the interface in such a way that users actually can do the oversight. Yeah. It may, for instance, some things put up an alert, very stupid thing, but are you sure? So they need to enable that. Yeah. And also that they can understand what it means. Also, for instance, that they give a history of previous decisions such that the supervisor can look at, okay, this is the current stage, but what has been done in the past. So it's enabling that. That's on the provider side. That on the user side, user in this case not is the final user, but is the company, organization that puts it into the market. They should train their people in sufficient way that they're not over-relying on the system outcome, so that they are critical, that they are aware, that's not just yes, 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 yes. Yeah? So those are obligations that those companies have on the different parts of the supply chain to implement this human oversight, basically to enable this human oversight.
Yeah, and I would like to talk now about another issue in the AI, that it is about the standardization bodies, that they don't have any fundamental right experiences. And these standardization bodies, that they are the European Committee for Standardization and the European Committee for Electrotechnical Standardization. So the thing is that the European Commission can mandate to develop harmonized standards, which providers will assess against. But the thing is that and these bodies, they are not named in the law. So what they talk is that they are going to be some standardization bodies, but they don't say concretely which ones are they. And they are kind of a little bit old-fashioned bodies. So this is here a little bit of problem in order to see how they are going to make this job. Yes. The result, the application, yeah.
Thank you. Can I ask another question?
Yeah, final one, because we need to get closing.
I
but
don't know then if someone wants to ask another question. Can I go? Okay. So in terms of legal liability, who would have like the responsible, like who would
legal what exactly?
Legal liability.
Liability.
Yes, because either you can have the provider who's providing, of course, the system, or also the person that is overseeing the system. Who would be responsible?
Yeah, very short answer, please. Very short.
Oh, here there is a problem too. Where I see the problem here is the secondary uses, where there is where there is the liability is a little bit blurred in the sense that it's true that you make an assessment that it's okay, but then you give it that that technology to a company, and that company can make a secondary use that it was against, or a use that it go against, not against, but it's different. I mean, maybe non-ethical or whatever, and then that person has not, or that company has not any liability. So here, in my opinion, we have a gap. So in terms of liability, I think that is blurred, and let's see how is applied in the future.
Thank you. Well, it is fascinating to see that we have a lot to speak about. It is very reassuring for the Observatory, which is Observatory on Sustainable Compliance Cultures, that you identify culture as one of the main, one of the fundamental things we need to care for. So I'm convinced that there is a lot that the Observatory can contribute. I really want to thank you for sharing your wisdom. I want to thank the audience for coming here on this cloudy day. I want to thank also those who are watching us from LinkedIn online. And now I'm happy to invite you to a coffee cocktail here. Those who are online will have to do it virtually. Perhaps you can use Chat GPT. And this is it for today. I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.